Good morning. How is everyone today? Oh, I missed. Hello, old friend. I thought we had broken up, or at least taken a break. Apparently, you need more of me. Good morning. I am Jenny Castleberry, and I am part of the team that is here to bring you inspirational, impactful, interesting Sunday experiences, from messages to the music, and you will have that today. And our friend the mask is back, I hope just for a short time. As you all know, the CDC and the city of Denver is encouraging us again to put the mask back on when we are in indoor spaces together. So that's what we're going to try to do. Another thing we thought we had done, and there's someone out there, this is your favorite quote about we make plans and God laughs, right? So, hey, howdy. We decided we probably shouldn't do the lunch service if we're supposed to be masked. You know, how do we do that? So we'll just cancel lunch. Well, when you don't tell the chef that you've done that, well, I told him, but I sent it to the wrong email, all this good stuff. And he makes 16 gallons of homemade organic green chili. You don't say no to lunch. So we are having lunch. Woohoo! Yes, we are. We're going to do our best to space it out. If you don't feel comfortable, we're going to have a couple of high tops outside where you can be out in the sunshine and enjoy your green chili and fruit and beautiful desserts from Whole Foods. Or have a cup of coffee and some dessert with us. So we're going to go ahead and keep that. And who knows, maybe even with the masks, we'll keep doing it as long as everybody can stay kind of separated and people can take it outside a little bit. What really excites me about this Sunday is we are bringing back, for the first time since we have reopened from the pandemic, the deep dive discussion. How many of you remember the deep dive discussion? All right. And it's a good time to say, how many of you are new? How many of you are first time? Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. All right, so we're going to give you, yo, Daryl, we need some flowers for our newbies. So we give you a flower just so that you can feel special, take it home, remember us, and so we can know who you are, and people will come up and say hello. So raise your hands if you're new. Yay! So for those of you who remember the deep dive, and those of you who don't know it, the deep dive is one of the things that hooked me with this place. What it is after we have lunch, after the service, and after we've had a bit to eat, those who want to meet in the historic library just behind these doors, and you get to sit with our speaker today, Betty Hart, who you will meet in minutes, and you get to dive deeper into the subject that she discusses. You get to ask questions. You get to say how you feel about it. Or you get to sit in a corner like a fly on the wall and just soak it up. But it gives you an opportunity to dive deeper into what we talked about, and then it can go many places from there. So I'm super excited to say we are bringing that back permanently, the deep dive, and we are excited that this is our first Sunday to bring it back. We have many more things that we'll share with you later. We'll do announcements at the end. And I wanted to say that I'm filling in for Rick Kitzman, our illustrious president, who is on vacation. And I believe he went on vacation so that he could come back rested and rejuvenated for us. I think it was all for us. That's the only reason he went on vacation. What I'd like to do now is to bring us all under the spell of Althea. And I'm going to ask you, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes, relax into your seat. You might check that that cell phone is on, vibrate, and silent. And just relax for a moment. Any stress that might have gotten you here that you might feel is still around, anything that doesn't serve you, just take a nice deep belly breath. And as you exhale, just let it go. Let it sink in. The earth can take it, I promise. Anything that isn't serving you, just let it sink down, out your feet. And just exhale. Take a couple more belly breaths. If you want to hold it, and then release. Let your whole body relax. Let it all go. And I want you to imagine that there is a beautiful golden light in the center of your body, in the center of your being. And this light is love and healing, community. It's all the good stuff. And this light is going to heal you physically. It's going to heal you emotionally, mentally, as it grows and it spreads, emanates. You feel this warmth, this goodwill and relaxation. And each of our little lights gets a little brighter, a little bigger. And we can imagine all these wonderful folks sitting with us. They each have a little light, and it's also growing. And they're all getting bigger. They're all getting way bigger than we are. And all those lights are coming together. And as this light heals us, its glow begins to heal everything around us. And it brings peace and love. And we can picture it's as big as this building. It's as big as this neighborhood. It's as big as this city. This light just keeps expanding. It's as big as this beautiful state and beautiful country, and up and out and up and out. As big as this world, and beyond and beyond. And I'd like for you to just take a moment, maybe a minute of silence. Think about whatever you want to let go of and whatever you want to let in. And now, if you want to start coming back, bring your consciousness back to the room, to the planet, to Althea, to you. Give it a little kiss goodbye, and go ahead and open your eyes. Those of you who know Althea know the story that it was started by a group of women in the 1800s who reread the Bible and decided it needed a little more feminine spirit. It needed a little bit of reinterpretation. They also very much believed in something called affirmative prayer and the ability to heal through your thoughts and through your prayers. Fast forward to 100 years ago, and they built this amazing building that you are in. 99 years to be specific. Next year we will celebrate our 100-year anniversary. Those are our roots. That's what we're about. We have changed with the times. We have changed our name over time. We are now the Althea Center. Pre-pandemic, we were 170 up to 200 folks in the stands, depending on what was going on. Since we've come back, we're still growing. Each Sunday gets a little bit better. So I would invite you to bring your friends, families, neighbors. Come check us out. Keep supporting us. We need you here. And one thing that's very special to us that does go back to these women from over 100 years ago is our statement of being. It expresses a lot of what we're about. And one of the things I like to point out is it uses the word perfect. And what I want to explain is that the word perfect, way back in the day of the Bible, didn't mean perfection like we think. It meant whole. It meant you see things in part, and you prophesy in part, and then the whole comes, and that's perfect. perfect. So that's what perfect means. It doesn't mean perfectionism. The statement of being is on your program, and we like to read it aloud together. So please join me. God is all, both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. We are individualized expressions of God and are ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. I would now like to invite up our musical guest. Susie Peak has been with us long before me, and she teaches my daughter violin, so she's awesome. Susie has been a professional musician most of her life. She worked her way through college playing that violin, earning a performance certification and Bachelor of Music degree with high honors. She played in major orchestras around the country, including the Colorado Symphony, and of course has performed at hundreds of weddings, celebrations, bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs. Please help me welcome Susie Peak. Betty, 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 Betty. Betty, Betty, Betty. That's got to be a song, right? Betty, 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 Betty. It is now. Betty Hart is a director, actor, facilitator, speaker, and woman of faith whose mission to help create space for necessary conversations. She had the great privilege of giving a TED Talk on compassion in November of 2020, and folks, it has reached over 1 million people, so go check her out on TED.com. This summer, she directed an Iliad for the Creed Repertory Theater, and she will be directing at Metropolitan State University this fall. Betty is immensely grateful for the opportunity for people to gather safely once more. And with her message, putting down perfectionism and other forms of self-loathing, please help me welcome Betty Hart.
Good morning, everyone. I'm setting my timer. So my plan today is that we will talk and then there'll be some Q&A because I recognize that everyone may not be able to stay for the deep dive. So that's the plan. And each of you should have received an index card when you came in. So at any point in time, if a question pops into your mind, feel free to write down that question. And then on the other side, I'll ask you to do something with it in a little bit, okay? And then we have an amazing gentleman in the back who has his hand up ready to help you. So if you need an index card, please just raise your hand and someone will bring it to you. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to open with a little prayer. Awesome God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And thank you for this message of love. Help me to allow myself to just be completely authentic and vulnerable and share with this great group of people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you are wondering how it is that Ginny and company found me, I'm happy to start off by telling you it is because of an incredible speaker that you had the great privilege of having a little earlier this year, my friend, Stephen Burge. Now, what you may not know about Stephen Burge, especially as you saw him present so beautifully, is that he hates public speaking. And so when I watched him do this online, I sent him a text afterward and said, "You were amazing. I can't believe that. I thought you hated speaking." And he replied through text, "I did it so I could introduce them to you." I thought he was joking too, but then I opened my email and he had sent an email to Ginny. So that's how I'm here today. And I thank you, Stephen. So I want to talk to you all today about perfectionism. And what's interesting is that perfectionism is simply one of the different ways that many of us exhibit self-loathing. For some of you, it can be being hypercritical. For some of you, it could be judging others. There's so many different ways that we don't fully love ourselves, but I'm going to tell you about kind of my path to moving away from that. Picture, if you will, little Betty. Little Betty was very precocious. She was very rambunctious. She was very full of life. People loved her. She loved herself. And the first time she took a test when she was small, she was very, very smart, and she got 95 out of 100. Many people would have celebrated that victory. Many people would have cheered. It would have been considered an accomplishment. But not little Betty. Little Betty, who came from a family of excellence and powerful achievers, instead noticed the 5. She did not celebrate the 95. She did not smile. She did not look at that as an A or as an accomplishment. Instead, she obsessed about the 5. I saw a lot of nods of agreement, so I see that there are quite a few other people who perhaps experienced that as a child or perhaps developed it as an adult. But that began my journey of seeking perfection. And I love that Ginny talked about the fact that you can use the word perfect, and perfect did indeed once upon a time mean this sense of wholeness, fulfillment, maturity. But we have the ability as people to warp things. And so little Betty, who read voraciously and lived in all kinds of other worlds through the power of words, knew that there was this thing called perfection, and she had to attain it. And when she didn't, she would work harder to become that. That led to doing so many great things and not being able to appreciate very many of them. Imagine, if you will, when your friends would get all C's and they would say that their parents celebrated, and you had 4 A's and 2 B's, and you knew that there was going to be a conversation about the difference between the ratio of B's and A's and how you could have done better with the B's. That began my journey of perfectionism. I did not know, in wanting to be strong, good, excellent, that would lead me down a path of accomplishing great things, but not experiencing the fullness of joy that we all should. I didn't realize that every time I condemned myself for the 5% rather than celebrating myself for the 95, that I wasn't truly loving myself. Oddly enough, my parents weren't therapists, so I did not have these realizations. I did not realize that I was continuing to move through life judging myself over and over and over again. And because I'm not selfish in any way, I extended that judgment to others. I see a few of you understand. And so that began my journey. And the greatest gift was discovering one day that I was doing it, and then being able to choose a different path. I began to become someone who I reverently call a recovering perfectionist. The reason I say recovering is that if indeed, and you know what your poison is, your self-loathing poison is, whatever it is, if you've done it for years and years and years, it kind of becomes a part of your DNA. You've literally wired your brain to do those things. And so I have to remind myself actively to be a recovering perfectionist. I have to remind myself that though indeed I want to get it right all the time, what actually makes me human is that I'm not going to. And the discovery that more people would actually recognize who I was when I was willing to acknowledge my flaws was revolutionary. The idea of being able to show up and look at yourself in the mirror and love yourself, period, was a great, great revelation. What I find fascinating is that the Bible actually encourages us to do the same thing. You might have imagined and remembered the 10 Commandments. Many of the commandments told you about what you shouldn't do, right? And then a person came up to Jesus one day and said, okay, I've studied. I just want to know, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answered really simply. It's to love God, love self, love others. You may have heard it this way. O hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and you will love your neighbor as yourself. What's fascinating is that most of us have heard about loving God, and most of us try to love others, our neighbors, but we forget that there is a key step in there, loving ourselves. I firmly believe that if each and every person in this room simply loved ourselves completely, flaws and all, then the offshoot of that would be that we would love others differently. I don't know about you, but when I get myself into a quandary and I move into a place of overwhelm, if I substitute myself for someone else, the problem is rather simple. If a friend were going through the challenging situation that I was going through, it is easy to be able to extend grace for your friend. It is easy to be able to give your friend encouragement. It is easy to be able to lean in and listen and give space for your friend to experience what they're experiencing. I can tell you it was never that easy to do it for myself when I was trying to operate as a perfectionist. So I'm here today to tell you that I would love for you to consider the idea of putting down perfectionism or your self-loathing poison of choice for something else instead. As you know, if you've ever had any kind of a habit that is destructive, and perfectionism is certainly one of them, you've built up that habit, a lifetime of that. One of the reasons I believe that I exhibited perfectionism is because I had a desire for self-preservation. I believed that I needed to present myself as perfect in order for others to like me. I see some people nodding their heads. The idea that if I were perfect, then they could accept me and then we could live peaceably together was a very big part of me. And so when I decided to take that down and become a recovering perfectionist, I had to recognize a few things. One, as much as I had wanted to believe it was possible, it was never possible for me to be perfect in the first place. Second, one of the things that bonds all of us together as humans is our fallibility. And three, that we, the other people in the room, can always see who you are, even when you're pretending to be someone else. So isn't it remarkable what happens when you walk in and they see that you know exactly who you are and they know who you are and you can just kind of go, uh-huh. So these are the things that I've begun to do as a person, and I will fully acknowledge that I do not always succeed. There is still something in me when I succeed that begins to criticize first. And I do have to sometimes tell myself to stop. It's just the way it is. So I want to give you some examples of some of the things that I did that were a part of self-loathing. Much of college, through a good portion of my adulthood, I rarely slept. I would go as far as I could, as long as I could, and then I would just, kind of crash and then repeat. I didn't eat properly in college. I really did almost exclusively eat French fries and hot fudge sundaes. And I looked great and I felt great. It was horrible for my body, but I felt good. And I also walked around dehydrated because I next to never drank water. I know some of you understand what that's like, right? You can do self-loathing behaviors that could even make you feel good, and you don't even realize it. Do you realize how little you can actually take care of yourself if you never get sleep? Do you know how much healing happens when you sleep? Do you know how much mental health is tied to good, restful, deep sleep? Yeah. So I just say these things to you because maybe some of you out there are doing some of the things I used to do. I'm just naming my things. Again, you know your own. But these are things that I did because I didn't fully love me. Right? So one of the things I want you to be thinking about is, how are you loving you? How often do you tell yourself no? And when could you tell yourself yes instead? For example, some people I heard gained weight during COVID. I hear the average was 19, but it could have been less or more. So sometimes that means we look in the mirror and we're busy evaluating ourselves based on that instead of looking at ourselves with love. The body is a very interesting thing. It actually has programmed ourselves to believe what we say about ourselves rather than what others say. Thus, Stephen could say, "You're a good speaker." In fact, we literally had this conversation when I said, "Why would you recommend me?" And he said, "You're a great speaker." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And we had this whole thing, right? What's interesting about the body is that my body, your body, believes what you have to say about you more than what I or any of your friends say about you. This is a big consternation to you parents out there, because you're constantly trying to speak life into your kids, and then they look at you and they say the opposite, and you're like, ugh, right? But it's true. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do when you look at yourself in the mirror say, "Oh, you gained weight, look at you," you believe that. Versus if you look at you and say, "You're beautiful, you're sensitive, you're kind," your body believes that. It believes what you say about you. So if we're going to really actively lay down the practice of perfectionism, then we have to take on the practice of self-love. And self-love includes our self-talk, how we speak to each other, how we speak to ourselves specifically. And that doesn't mean going around being in a place of delusion. I'm not encouraging that. I'm not encouraging narcissism. But what I am encouraging you to do is to actually speak well of yourself. Every single person in this room and anyone watching actually has a skill, a talent, and ability. There is something about you that is unique and wonderful and specific and significant. But do you spend time honoring that part of you? Or, like little Betty who became adult Betty, do you only look at the little things that are not as strong? So practicing self-love instead of the idea of self-preservation is one of the thoughts I want to leave with you. I also want to encourage you, as you put on more of self-love, is this idea of putting down criticism and continual judgment. When you really love yourself, and the things one of your friends probably say about you is that you naturally extend grace. You naturally, when they make a mistake, you give them the benefit of the doubt. You love them anyway. You encourage them to forgive themselves. You speak well of them. How many of us do the same to ourselves? How many of us extend grace as an ongoing practice to ourselves? I'd love to kind of ask this question if you're willing to answer. If you go around extending grace to yourself 24/7, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands. Okay, great. So then that means we all have a place to be able to work from. I also want to tell you that this idea of vulnerability, being able to show up, flaws and all, is powerful. When you are able to just be where you are and actually stand in that space where you don't know what's going to happen, kind of like when a speaker gets before you. You don't know what's going to happen, but you're willing to bear yourself on a continual basis. It's freeing. It's loving. It's engaging. So I encourage you to move into that place of vulnerability, literally walking into the deep on an ongoing basis simply because you love yourself. When you truly love yourself and you put down perfectionism and many of the other forms of self-loathing, a confidence comes because you know who you are. So you're no longer trying to protect yourself because other people may say or do something against you. You know who you are and you walk in that truth. And that truth is sexy. It is beautiful. It is empowering, engaging, and freeing to just be free to be who you are. It's odd to me that most of us spend our entire lives wanting to be able to live in the fullness of ourselves. And many people don't do it. We listen to the voices in our head. We continue the practices that we developed when we were younger. And we don't take off those garments and be willing to show up in vulnerability and authenticity. The last practice that I will give you to try instead of self-loathing in your path to self-love is compassion. The definition of compassion that I always use is really one of the original definitions, which is to suffer with or to suffer alongside. When your friend is going through a challenging time, those of you who love your friends deeply are willing to have compassion for your friend. You are willing to suffer with them. You are willing to suffer alongside them when they are going through depression, when they are in a place of grief, when they are confused or overwhelmed or don't know what the next move is. You are willing, because of your love for them, to suffer with or suffer alongside. How many of us are willing to do the same for ourselves? To suffer with that thing that you know that you do that you shouldn't be doing, that you said you were going to stop but you haven't. How many of us are willing to suffer with ourselves? Not as many as I'd like. So my hope is that as you begin to think about your life, think about what that aspect of self-loathing is for you, that you will choose to become a recoverer of that, and that you will choose to love yourself. And for those who love people so much that you can't imagine taking time for self-love, I'll encourage you this way. When you truly love yourself, you are better equipped to love others. So if you need a reason to truly try this thing of self-love, know that you are able to give more to others, to be present more to others, to be healthy with others when you are indeed doing those things for yourself. So on that card, where many of you have been writing, I would ask you on the card, the side that has nothing written on it, I'd like you to answer this question. It is only for you, or you can just ask yourself the question for my processors who need more time to think about it, and you can think about it later. What is one way you would like to love yourself better? That is the question I'd like you to write down. What is one way that you would like to love yourself better? And then I'd love for you to ponder that and come up with an answer. I will say that when you are not fully on the recovering perfectionist path, an easy thing to do is to say, oh, well, I could love myself better by doing 25 different things, and then you get overwhelmed again. So I encourage you to think of one thing and then choose to work on that one thing. You can always add to your list later, but there is a beautiful sense of accomplishment when you've done one thing well, and then you can move on to the next. Questions that you have, I'd love to hear them. Yes. Oh, hold on 1 second. We're going to have you speak into the mic. We apologize if that's awkward. It just helps the recording.
Test.
Okay, so one of the things that you were talking about perfectionism, how do you put down perfectionism, and do you have any practical practices to do this?
Yeah, so one is acknowledging that you are a perfectionist. You know, most of us don't like to acknowledge it. We do it privately, but we don't even do it publicly. So actually starting to let people know, hi, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I have delighted in doing this for years, but I'm choosing to change my path, and I'm inviting you to actually catch me when I start to do it. Having that circle of people who can help keep you accountable is a beautiful gift. It will be obnoxious at first. Just know that, as any change is. But there's something wonderful when you find yourself going back to old behaviors and your friends can tell you, you're doing it again. And then you have that moment of pause. So that would be one of the first things, to actually openly own it. I am a recovering perfectionist. And today I'm choosing to change. And then begin. And it's up to you who you share it with. You could share it with your whole friend group. You could just share it with your BFF, just your partner. It's up to you how far you take that. But that would be the first step that I would encourage. Thank you. Thank you.
That was a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm grasping with this question or thought on how it relates to what you're saying, and maybe it doesn't at all. But maybe to help incorporate.
And if you could keep it closer to your mouth, just because with that mask it's a little hard to hear you.
Thank you, because I can hear myself, so thank you for saying that. Sometimes I can hear myself too much.
Don't we all?
So what are your thoughts on a slightly different variation of what you're talking about, which is how people can internalize what is being reflected back to them? And that could be any way from someone being fired from a job, someone being broken up with in a relationship, or flipped off in traffic, you know, that someone sees you as not a good person, and then you or a human being would internalize that. Does that make any sense?
It is making sense. Let me ask back to you what I think I heard. How do you work on the internalization that we do because of the reflections of others as part of this practice of putting down something of self-loathing and really actively self-loving?
That's a great way.
Okay, great. So I love that you asked that, because I mentioned briefly this idea of listening to the voices in our head, and that is part of that internalization. Those voices and those ideas often come from external sources, right? Somebody will say something to you, whether it was when you were a kid or something about your driving or whatever. You're driving down the street and someone just yells, "Get out of the way, you idiot," right? And you just start to internalize that. And like most of us will at first deflect, right? Like, I'm not an idiot, you were just driving wrong, right? But on the wrong right day, we begin to have a loop that plays inside us. And then suddenly, idiot is a word that keeps popping up, right? It came from an external source, but we then begin to internalize it. I think one of the key things about that, and I used a simple one, right, because it obviously can go really deep, is that loving yourself and recognizing that you are loved both by God and yourself is the beginnings of helping you to deal with that internalization. And then it goes back to what I said about you speaking about yourself. Because what we listen to, even in our heads, is what we then begin to operate on, right? So that's why it's so dangerous when we have people in our lives who say nothing but negative things to us, because we internalize those things and we begin to believe them, and then we begin to say the very things that they said. So that's why it's important for you to be speaking well of yourself. It's why it's important for you every single day, if you're willing, to actually tell yourself out loud, I love me. I love me so much. I so love me today. In all my imperfection, I love and accept me. We don't do a good job of that in this country. We instead like to rehearse the negatives. And so for me, it's very much like the 5% I got wrong versus that 95%. And that's why I encourage you to think about what is something that you love about you. And if you want and are so inclined, feel free to put those things up on your mirrors so that when you walk past them, you see something amazing about you that you are telling you. What I love is your current you is speaking to your future you when you write down this beautiful thing and you put it up. So when this day, when you're strong and confident, you write down, I am kind. I am generous of spirit. I love my friends deeply. And you put these things on your mirrors. And then on that right, wrong day, when you wake up and those other voices are speaking to you, the truth of you is reflected back literally in the mirror. So that is one of the things that I would encourage you to do to help counter that narrative that happens because of the outside world. Thank you. Yeah. Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. So, and I think this kind of touches on what you said, but thank you. Help me. So the question is, why do we focus on the 5% rather than the 95% that's good? Do you have something for me there, please?
You know, I knew someone was going to ask that question, though I hoped you wouldn't. But because there's so many reasons, right? There's so many reasons why. So I can tell you about some of mine. I can't tell you why all of you do the same, but I can tell you that there is a part of us that because of criticism that we've heard, it goes back to what he told us, right? We internalize it. And so then we stop believing the best in ourselves, though we all want to believe the best in ourselves, and then it becomes easier to believe some of those other things. So for me, because I literally was in this family of incredibly excellent achievers, they're like amazing individuals, it was really easy to say, oh, I'm not that, right? Rather than saying, oh, I am that. I'm really grateful that part of the reason I'm able to have kind of come to this other place is because I had an incredible family member, my Nana, who was my mother's maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, who literally, with all of the wisdom and amazingness of herself, just decided to pour in and to invest in me. And she did this beautiful thing that I still recognize is part of why I am the way I am. She let me sit at what I called, as little Betty, the Council of Elders. In reality, these were her girlfriends, but I called them the Council of Elders because they were so wise. And in a time when kids were not invited to speak and to share what they thought, my Nana always said, Betty, what do you think? And I would share. And then they would shake their heads like you all are. And I was accepted as a child amongst this group of people who were so much older and so much wiser than I was. That helped me to recognize that there was something fantastic in me before I had any real proof points, because she simply took the time to listen. So I think there's something innate in us that wants to believe the opposite, and that sometimes we need some people to come alongside us to help us recognize what's really true. Thank you for that question.
So Betty, thank you. I think you may have already answered this in part, but I'm curious to know how and when did you come to your awareness that you were a perfectionist, and and once you were there, how did you start seeing the changes?
Ooh, such a great question. Well, I'll tell you, it sounds awful, but it's true. I used to revel in being a perfectionist. So in the same way that I encourage you to say now I'm a recovering perfectionist, I openly used to say all the time, oh, no, I'm a perfectionist. Oh, no, I can be perfect. It's possible. Yeah, you can be deceptive either way, right? And so I used to do that all the time, and yet reality would kind of tell me the opposite, right? I'm calling myself a perfectionist, constantly striving for perfection, and never attaining it. And I think really what happened was when I began to look at some of the feedback that I would get from some friends, because I really do believe that perfectionism is a self-preservation strategy, there were limits to how far I would let people get to know me. And I had some beautiful friends who complained about that. And they said, hey, you know everything about us, but you are not opening yourself up to us. And I looked at them like they were crazy because, I was so open, but I wasn't. And it was that recognition that then began me on a path of reflection and asking myself, well, why? Why don't they know me? And why don't I share those things? And it was the recognition that I had such a desire to be esteemed in their sight because of perfection that I was busy doing that, even though I knew I wasn't. And so that was kind of a reckoning moment for me. And I decided I didn't want to be that. The reason my friends loved me for who I was. I loved them. I knew all of their stuff. I wasn't judging them. Then why couldn't I extend that same grace to myself? And so that's kind of how it began. And, it's been a process. It was not easy at all. You didn't even realize how often those thoughts are in your head. And so I literally had to combat it and really bring in people into my circle and say, I need help with this. Would you please call me on it? I'm going to give you that look that you hate when you do it, but I need you to do it anyway because I know there's a place I could go. And so it was really just having some friends ask some questions and really ask some things of me that I wasn't prepared to give that took me on that path of reflection. That's a really great question. Thank you. I have about 2 minutes left, and so I kind of want to leave you with some final thoughts, and then perhaps I've intrigued you to come to the deeper dive so we can go deeper. One of the things that I would love for you all to do is, because I was an active person who was practicing self-preservation, I want you instead to practice self-love. And I want you to just kind of hear some of these kind of opposites that I think is interesting. Self-loathing exhibitions like perfectionism, judgment, negative self-talk is inherently unhealthy. Self-love is healthy. We all want grace from others. Can we then extend grace to ourselves so that we can extend grace to others? And what is the risk of putting down self-perfection and loathing? We're already doing things that are harmful. What is the risk of being able to be your fully authentic self? Letting people be able to see you for who you are, which is how they see you anyway, and walking in the beautiful kindness of our imperfections. We lean in when someone is vulnerable, but so many of us take the time to mask and not really be vulnerable and authentic. So I want to encourage you to identify your practice of self-loathing and consider the radical idea that God loves you, wants you to love yourself, and you probably want to as well. It's a risk, but after the 1.5 years we've experienced, aren't we willing to risk something positive that benefits not only ourselves, but our world community? Thank you.
First off, I want to say thank you. That was beautiful. And when I read the topic, I went into my files and said, I know that I have something that fits that, and a piece of paper jumped out that I'm going to share with you that was given to me by a very special lady by the name of Reverend Rainbow Johnson. And it's called a promise to myself. I promise from this day forward to accept myself unconditionally, to love myself and cherish my existence, to always show myself respect, to not demand perfection, to stop putting myself down, to give myself the credit I deserve, to be my own best friend, someone I can depend on, to open my eyes to the beautiful promise in me, to utilize my God-given talent to build inner security and make a positive contribution in the world. Because only if I love myself can I truly love others. Only if I respect myself can I respect others. Only if I am open to the specialness in me can I genuinely appreciate the uniqueness in others. Only if I cherish my own existence can I become the person I was meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie Carter, one of the pillars of our community. Thank you, Connie. I would like to invite up those folks who are going to help us with the offering. Is Judith Witten? Judith Witten? Oh. Okay. All right. So then you'll be coming up to do the prayer part. So this is where we literally pass the basket. Yes, we are back to that. We cannot keep the lights on without your financial support. We also have something called a dip jar in the back. And we can begin, we'll begin the music here in just a moment. So please be generous if you can. The dip jar is a way to give with your credit card in the back. You can also do that later. And we'll listen to some beautiful music, and then we'll have Susie play even more for us.
This is a prayer we use in Redondo Beach, California. It's joyously I give with an attitude of gratitude, knowing that as I give, I do receive, and I'd like you to join me in doing that the second time. Joyously I give with an attitude of gratitude, knowing that as I give, I do receive. And so it is. And Althea wishes to thank and bless everyone for your sharing and your offering for today's services. And I do want to thank you for your talk. It was wonderful. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Susie. So we are coming to a close. In a moment, we'll have our closing prayer and a rousing community song led by Daryl to close us out with Rick on piano. The first thing I want to do, because this is what we always forget, right, is to thank everyone who is a part of making this happen. Susan Stites, where are you, girl? She is our behind-the-scenes queen. She's somewhere. She runs the video, the live stream. She's going to help take your money at the dining room. Daryl, who is here 24/7, I think he lives in the basement, and not in a creepy way. He runs this place. Thank you, Daryl. All the people who make it happen. And of course, Stephen, who brought us Betty. Ah! Yeah, Betty's going to be coming back. I can just tell. Yep, she made the cut. She made callbacks, right? You didn't know that this was an idea. Yeah, you made callbacks. Let me also remind you that we always have what's called prayer partners. This is for anyone who is feeling a need for a little bit of help. We do believe in affirmative prayer. If you have something you're processing in your life and you want someone who is a practitioner who has been taken through some special training on how to pray with you, immediately after the service, Suzanne Thomas, are you here waving your hand? There she is, Suzanne. She will be one of our prayer partners in the back, but there will be plenty of folks, again, Historic Library. If this is your first time with us, lunch is on us, so please stay. Again, if you'd rather just have a coffee or some wonderful dessert, also please stay with us. And then after, we'll check on the time, but let's say around 12:30, we're going to do the deep dive with Betty in the Historical Library. And then you have announcements. Take this home with you. You can go to our website. You can look here. There are just a couple of things I want to highlight. A week from today, we won't do a deep dive. We will be doing our annual general meeting. It's one of those bits of business that we do have to take care of once a year, and it's your opportunity to hear from the board, hear what's happening at Althea, and ask a few questions. So that will take place next Sunday, and then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming. We have Zach Kopp, who is teaching a class on writing about your supernatural journey. Mariposa, the first Wednesday, is always diversity dialogue, so that's this week. We'll have an accountability circle. You can learn about that. Again, this is all on here, but we like to point it out a little bit. We know you can read this. Healing meditation relationships. That will be a 7-week class. Take a look at that. And community connections every Thursday morning. Is Kathy Humphreys here? I don't think I saw her. She leads that. So much about what we do. And upcoming Sundays, next Sunday, we will have a guest speaker, Jeff Scott Ruiz, who's going to talk about a near-death experience he had with a fire and how his spirituality changed, how everything changed for him after that. Another Sunday, we have one of our folks from the Divine Science Church in Pueblo who is going to come up just for us, Sean Furlong, to talk about letting your soul soar. And then we have our very own Alice Brink, who is going to talk to us about the saving power of substance. So every Sunday is different, amazing music, different musicians, different speakers, different rituals, different exercises. So please join us in all of those. And now I would like to welcome up the Reverend Arika King, who is going to take us into a closing prayer. And then again, we'll have a rousing community song with Daryl. Thank you so much.
Divine Spirit, Father, Mother, God, we know that you are always with us. Sometimes we forget to listen and we forget to ask. But today you have answered our needs. You have given us a beautiful message, one that we may not always understand, but when we hear it again, we grow. And so we just say thank you. Thank you for always being with us, always giving us what we need. And so today that has been a clear example. So thank you. And we just say, and so it is. Amen.
Good morning. Today I'd like to do a song from the 60s that a lot of you probably know. It was by Jackie DeShannon. It's called What the World Needs Now. So if you'd like to stand as you're able and join me on What the World Needs Now. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just none. Sorry. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you want to know what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. No, not just for some, oh, but just for everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.